What's going on, guys? It's going to be our Summary of Markets Week 72. Hope you guys had a great weekend. We're going to talk about SPY, gold, oil, Bitcoin, Ethereum, the usual. Then we're going to get into some options flow. I want to talk to you guys about some things that I added to the watch list that we saw on Cheddar Flow last week. Some big names were getting some flow last week, so I want to go over those. But we're going to get started with SPY first before we get into that. So last week, pretty bullish. You can see pretty much every day was green or very, very slightly red. We had a few gap ups. We did have a gap up on Thursday and Friday. So those gaps are unfilled. So if we go down to a lower time frame, we can see that those gaps are still open. That is one thing that does worry me a little bit because, like I told you guys, when SPY goes into all-time high, it likes to come back and fill those gaps. So if it does put in gaps while you're pushing an all-time high, very likely does pull back and fill those before it goes higher. So this gap at like 425, and then we have one down here around 423. Those are a little worrying, but it still does look very strong. So I wouldn't call for like an immediate dump to fill those gaps, but if we do see some sell pressure coming in like Monday or Tuesday, then that's very likely what it's going to be doing. Okay. So for now, while it's not selling off, I would anticipate a 428 target, maybe 430 before we do see any major correction, right? So I would not consider those gap fills to be a major correction. Those would just be gap fills, right? They would not be a major pullback. So if we do pull back to fill those gaps, don't be calling for like a macro top and looking for a massive correction down to like 411, 410. It could just be filling those gaps and then going higher. So if you see a little bit of sell pressure, don't be panicking. I really wouldn't start panicking until we started to lose like maybe 420. But even then, if you lose 420, you have support right there around 418, which is the 50-day moving average. So really, until we lose the 50-day moving average, I would not be too bearish, right? Now, obviously, if you guys are short-term traders, that is a pretty big correction from here to the 50. That's about 2%. So that's pretty decent for scalpers and short-term day traders. But for swing traders, that's not really a big move. Okay, so for right now, look for 428, look for 430. If it fills those gaps and then starts to push back up, then we're looking for around like 435 to 440, but that will be most likely on next week's video. For now, those are your targets. And then if we do pull back, look for those little gap fills as your bearish targets. And mainly there's going to be a lot of support around 421 to 420. If you do lose that, look for 418. All right, moving on to gold. Gold had a very nice downtrend that we broke out of. We saw that massive uptrend break away from that long-term downtrend on the weekly. But now we're actually seeing a massive correction back down to that original breakout point. So if we go back to a weekly, we can kind of see what's going on here. We have a break of a downtrend. We did reclaim the 50, but it was not able to hold on to it during that first retest. You came back to retest it, tried to bounce, but then there was no continuation. The day after the bounce, you immediately gave away all of your gains. And then the day after that, you saw a very big correction back down to, sorry, not the day after, the week after, we saw a big correction. And now we're almost back down to that range. So if we go down to a daily, the main area that you want to watch for support is that area around 1750, 1713, and then 1673. That is that bulldog that created that accumulation that led us higher, right? So until we start to bounce, which we most likely will not bounce until we reclaim like 1791. So until we start to bounce, that is where we're heading. 1750, 1713, and then right around 1670. If we do reclaim, I'd say like 1800, you want to keep an eye on that 50-day moving average right around 1830, which is also the OTS trail. And then you want to look for that gap fill to around 1861. Okay? For now, you are trying to gain momentum, but that's most likely just due to the consolidation, not due to buyers stepping in. Moving on to oil, we did break that pivot that I told you guys about on the daily, that very long pivot that was going to act as a magnet. So it did act as a magnet. It drew price right into it. We failed it a little bit, and then we bounced right through it. So very nice engulfing came in on June 21st, and then we had continuation basically only on Friday. All the days after that engulfing just kind of gave you a little bit of consolidation, but then Friday finally gave you that continuation. So for now, we are hitting our 74 to 75 area. Look for that 76 target, and then 77 would be those fib targets. If we can blow through those targets, then we're talking 80 to 83. Okay. Until you lose that pivot, I would definitely lean bullish. If you lose the pivot around 72, look for around 70, and then main support around 67. All right, moving on to Bitcoin. Basically, nothing has changed. We're still holding that range that we've been in. We had a little bounce off the lower buy point here, which then sold off on the high, which then bounced off the low again, and now we're selling off the 50. So what's a little worrying here, if you are a bull, is this sell-off here came very quickly. Okay, so we had a nice buying opportunity. Like I told you guys, buy the dips, right? Buy the dips, sell the high on the range. So we had a nice buying opportunity here on the dip, but it quickly sold off on that 50% of the range. So typically, if you have something that gives you the buy, but then it bounces and you don't really get to that upper area, this is weakness, right? Because the sellers are stepping in early. The sellers should be stepping in around here, but they're actually stepping in around here. So the sellers are getting a little aggressive here. They're trying to push it lower. Another thing that we can see is the OTS put in a new pivot, which typically happens when those sellers are getting aggressive, but then the buyers are stepping in to try to push it back. So the sellers are aggressive here, but the buyers are also trying very hard to hold this level. So what does that tell us? That tells us that if we lose this low around 28,000, not only are the sellers going to continue, you're going to see continuation, so you're going to see more sellers step in. You're also going to see buyers stepping out. Okay? Because the buyers are aggressively buying here, but the sellers are more aggressive than the buyers. So if the sellers finally win here, and this does lose the low, not only are you going to see more sellers step in, you're going to see a lot of stop losses be triggered on those buyers that are fighting that level. Okay? So this could show us, if we do sell off, a very long bottom wick. That's even if it bounces, right? So if it does want to bounce, this could generate one of those liquidation wicks, kind of like what we see here. Okay? So just be prepared for something like that. If you lose 28,000, it's probably not going to be like a very soft sell-off. It's probably going to be very hard, right? It's going to be a very quick liquidation event, most likely. So what I'd be targeting in something like that is obviously the pivot right around 23.8. If it gets very strong, I'd be looking for around 20,000. Okay, that's like worst case scenario. For now, you are holding the lows. So as long as 28,000 holds, you're going to be looking for a break of 34.5. OTS shows up around 36. Then you have the 50-day right around 39. Okay, so your major resistance is going to be from 36 to 40, this upper area here, which is still just the top of the range. Okay, and you're not going to be overly bullish until you reclaim 41. Okay, and that's most likely not going to happen this week, so we'll probably talk about that next week. If you do reclaim 41, something major happens here, I would be looking for around 44 to 45 as your main target, and then around 49 as the next target. Okay? Now, basically, what I just said on Bitcoin is the same exact analysis that I would give you on Ethereum. But what I will say on Ethereum is it does look a little weaker. But the weakness is actually creating a small div. So you have a very small bull div coming in, but it's not confirmed yet. If the momentum started to climb here while price was falling, then that would confirm the bull div. Okay, but for now, it's not confirmed, so we're going to ignore it. What I will say is, once again, you do have that pivot coming in, which is showing the buyers are trying to fight these aggressive sellers. You did put in that level, but look at what we're doing already. If I zoom in here, we put in the pivot, tried to bounce off of it, then we had the sell-off on June 25th, and then we had the retest today. So we came back to try to break that pivot, and we're actually failing the pivot. So that is very, very bad. Okay, we still have 4 hours left, so we still have some time for this pivot to be reclaimed. But if we do close like this, that is very scary for the bulls. Okay. Now, what I will say is, if you're not in any positions, and you're looking for an opportunity, until the range is lost, you still want to respect the range. So you want to be buying the lows and selling the highs, right? So a buying opportunity is coming very soon. Anywhere from 1,500 to around like 1,700, you're most likely going to see some buyers step in. Now, if they don't step in, this pivot right here and the range low is basically like your last line of support. You lose that, very likely could go down to 1,000. I'm not going to call for this 600 pivot. I think that's a little ridiculous. But there really is not much support below 1450 until you get down to like this value right here. And if we look at that value, let's grab a volume range. We can see the POC is right around 12 and the value area low is right around 1,000. Okay? So those are your two most important levels. Right around 1250 and then right around 1,000. There really is not much value in between here and there. Okay? So just be prepared for that sell-off if it does come. Now, what I will say is if the buyers do step in here, maybe the bull div does play out. We should be seeing like 2,200. And then if we reclaim 2,200, we very likely could see 25. Okay? That is it for the summary of markets. Let's move on to the options watch list. What I wanted to cover first before we got into the stocks is some of the flow that was coming in last week. So we had some flow coming in on Micron, which started coming in around the lows. And at first I was like, what is this guy doing? This guy's buying a bunch of calls when we're selling off. The only thing that could possibly happen that could help him is a double bottom. And that's actually what happened. So he had a very good play. He bought the bottom. The contracts that he bought, I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me see if I can find them. But they were currently trading at like $5, and I believe by Friday they were over $6. So he was getting a pretty good price on those. I can't find them, so we'll move on. But this can turn out to be, I talked about this last week in Discord, this can turn out to be a bulldog. So I said the best case scenario would be a pop-up here into the 50-day moving average, then a small correction. This is actually what we want to see. A small correction off the 50, but then it doesn't go lower than, say, $80. So $80 becomes the low here. And then, hopefully, I mean, this is a complete gamble because you guys know I don't play earnings. But then hopefully we have good earnings, right? So pull back, hold 80 as the low, have good earnings, and then that will send us higher to maybe 85 to 90. That would be the most bullish pattern that we could have. Now, the reason I would like to see a small correction here instead of just going straight up is if it goes straight up, even if it does have good earnings, you could have seen most of the move into the pre-earnings move, and then even with good earnings, you could go lower. Okay, so having that correction before earnings would be what we want to see. All right, moving on. Clove actually already had its move, so we're going to get rid of that. Etsy actually already had its move as well, but we're going to keep watching this. It had some call flow come in right around, I think it was like 172, and they were buying the 185s and the 190s. So they were looking for this gap fill. They already got their gap fill, but what I like about this, and we're going to mark this out here. What I like about this is it has that pattern that we look for, where we have that kind of rollover top, starts to sell off, accumulates, and then it reclaims the 50-day moving average. This is a very bullish pattern for a trend momentum shift back to the upside. Okay? So if this can hold above the 50, or what I typically like to do, what you can't really do here because it doesn't really give you a really good trend. It's not the worst though. But what I typically like to do is I like to grab the trend that created that push up. And more often than not, this trend will look more kind of like this. It will be steeper. This one would kind of give you a deeper pullback if you did pull back. But as long as we hold the trend that created that move above the 50, we should start to see that momentum shift back to the upside. Okay, so keep an eye on that. If we hold the trend, hold above the 50, we could start to see a move back to like 200 to 210. Keep an eye on that. Another one that was getting repeat call flow basically all week was Baidu. And we called this out down toward the lows when it was starting to break above like 191. You were starting to break above that pivot. This has the same exact pattern that we were talking about. You have that downtrend, but then it started to accumulate, right? And now we're reclaiming the 50. Okay, so beautiful pattern. Same thing here, though. We can't really grab a trend. The trend is kind of weak. But as long as we hold above that accumulation, hold above the 50-day moving average, we should start to climb. And we could start to see like 217, 230. There's a small gap around 239. All right. Moving on to Activision. Activision had massive flow coming in. Let me see if I can find those contracts. I think I have those on deck. Let's see. Those contracts were the 95s for November 19th. And that guy started buying those way down here around like 91 to 92. So he's already getting paid. They were going for around $5 when he bought them. So I'm not sure what they are now. But I know they spiked above $6 last week. So he was already up 20%. So that started to pop. But then we started to sell off on VWAP. This is kind of what I was waiting for, was a reclaim of these levels on the daily. But also the weekly close on that pivot. So this weekly close is beautiful. I was waiting for that pivot bounce on the weekly. We also got to buy the dip signal. So I'm just waiting for this little resistance around 93.50, which is on the weekly and the daily. There's a lot of resistance around here. If it starts to reclaim that, that's when I think those guys' lottos are going to start to really pay. It could really start to ramp all the way back to like 99 to 100 once we reclaim that support. Okay? So keep an eye on that. Moving on to Vail. Vail had massive call flow as well. They were buying a bunch of contracts right before we saw the infrastructure plan get announced. So obviously it was insider trading. They bought, I think it was like 10 million, somewhere around there. No, it was actually like 30 million, I think. 30 million in leaps. They were January 21st, 2022 leaps. $15 strike and $17 strike. I have it right here. It was actually 27 million in premium. And those came in the day before the infrastructure plan was released. Okay, so keep an eye on Vail. They're the #1 iron ore producer in the world, which goes into steel manufacturing, right? So keep an eye on steel. Keep an eye on anything that goes into infrastructure, which is mainly like railway, steel, stuff like that. Minerals, right? So watch all that stuff. Vail was getting a lot of call flow. Now, this was the biggest call out of the week. If you guys are in Discord, hopefully you guys made some money on this. I know a lot of you guys are messaging me, telling me that you guys did make some money on this. So you guys that hopped in, congrats, man. Really, really good trade. What happened? What made us call this out? Let me find it. They were the $49 calls for July 2nd. They started flooding in on Cheddar Flow. So I alerted you guys in voice chat. I alerted you guys in Discord. And those things absolutely skyrocketed. I actually called them out around $3 in Discord, but I called them out around $6 on Twitter. So they were already up 100% by the time I called them out on Twitter. But then they ran to $11. So even if you got in them late, they still gave you a 100% move. So massive, massive day for space. I think it was the biggest day it's ever had volume-wise. Yeah, biggest day it's ever had volume-wise. So massive, massive day. 261 million shares were traded. So huge. The reason I'm bringing this up, not just to brag, I think space looks fantastic for continuation. Okay, I think if it can stay above like 50 to 51, this looks really good for an all-time high break. Okay, you don't typically see moves like this that then just instantly fail back down to fill the gap. That is really big volume, and they're getting a lot of call flow, so I think this could be huge for continuation. Now, what I will say is Space is on our dog shit list. It is a dog shit company. And what we mean by that is the price action just is pretty much terrible. Every time we try to trade it, it does the opposite of what you expect. So be very careful, okay? This could pull back to retest the pivot around 47. It could pull back to come back and fill the gap. So just make sure you're watching these levels. These are all the important levels that I would keep an eye on. And once we start to lose these levels, just look for the next one, right? So if we don't lose these levels, here are the levels I would pay attention to. We have a level around 59, which would be the next target. And then we have a level around 63, which is the all-time high. Once we break all-time high, then, let me see, I'll give you some Fibonacci targets just in case this thing goes absolutely parabolic. If it goes parabolic, watch for the trigger around 67, and then we're going to look for around 80 as the main breakout target. Okay? Last but not least for the call flow was Expedia. This thing, let me pull these up, was getting absolute insane call flow on, I think it was Thursday and Friday. There was, I think, what was it, like 10 million? It was 10 or 20 million, I believe, by the end of Friday. But what's crazy about these is they're 2-year out leaps. He's buying January 20th, 2023, 195s. So he's buying leaps not for next year, but for the year after. This is a massive volatility play, okay? So what I was telling you guys on stream and in Discord, when big money buyers buy stuff like this that is that far away, they are not trading the delta. They're trading the vega. They're trading volatility. They will make more money off of volatility than they will off the price actually going in their direction. Okay, so because they're so far out, even if price went down here, but the implied volatility went up, say 3 to 5%, they would still make money because these leaps are so far away, their vega is extremely high. The vega is higher than the delta. Okay, if you guys don't understand what I'm talking about options Greeks. There's a video in the Discord. If you guys have the Discord, go to the mentorship section. I talk about it in there. But if you're not in the Discord, just type in options Greeks on YouTube. I'm sure there's hundreds of videos that go over it. Vega is how you get paid on volatility. If you're trading leaps, you're getting paid on volatility. So these leaps are kind of far away. They're pretty far out of the money. They are 14% out of the money. So they're pretty far out of the money. So he is also betting on a big price move. But like I said, it doesn't have to move that much for him to make money. As long as the implied volatility goes up, he will get paid very, very big. Now, there are a couple reasons why smart money would take a trade like this. The basic overall is insider trading. They know something is going to happen. They know some kind of announcement is going to come out. They know some kind of news event is going to happen that will spike the volatility. Okay, so I'm anticipating some kind of travel news or some kind of news that is specific to Expedia within the next few months. Okay, it doesn't have to happen anytime soon because he's betting 2 years out. It could happen 6 months from now and he'll still get paid. Okay, so just be on the lookout. Keep this thing on your watch list. Make sure you're checking for news every now and then. He could get paid very, very fat if that IV does spike. All right, moving on to stocks. Let me go over a few things that we were looking at. This is going to be a lot quicker than options. I'll speed through this. Another video is getting a little long. Let's see. No update on that. Let's see. We did have an update on SSTI. You did break our targets, came back to retest it, and now we're breaking out again. When we see bottoms like this, they very often go back to the sell-off point. So keep an eye on that. Very likely could go back to like 52 if it stays above 44. Eli Lilly bounced out of the buy zone like I was talking about in Discord. Hit our pivot. If it can get above like 238, look for 249. DoorDash still continuing to our targets. You blew through our resistance at 156. You hit our target at 168. Next target is 187. Get above that, 215. Moving on to crowd. Crowd bounced up, hit our final target around 251. If it can stay above that, look for around 260 to 270. Affirm is still consolidating up here. We really want to see this get back above 71. Get above 71, look for 79. Roku, absolute insane move last week. This was one of the biggest moves we called out in Discord. It had massive move on stocks. It had massive move on options. We called out a few lottos that came through on Cheddar Flow, and these things absolutely exploded. You had hundreds of % gains on those ones that we called out in Discord, so hopefully you guys made some money. Above 393, we were talking about 420 to 437. 420 has been taken. 437 is the next target. Get above that, you could get to around 460 to 480. Lulu, final target around 363 has been hit. So if you guys are in that trade, I would be taking some profit up here. If it does hold above 355, look for around 380 for the next move. Neo still looks pretty good here, but I'm still waiting on that momentum to break on the Momo. We want to see this thing break out on the Momo. We want to see it hold above that pivot around 44.50. If you can start to break 48, keep an eye on 50 to 52. Laser, JMA called out in Discord, beautiful call out. He said it was retesting the trend right around June 23rd. You had a gap up, and now we have a little bit of consolidation. This would be what I consider a micro pullback. We do not trade inside micro pullbacks. So look for a break of around 25.50 to 26. Then we could start talking about 30. Fubo, we called this out in Discord as well. Above 30, we were looking for 34.95. That target has been hit. Next target is 38 if you can stay above that. Target, we were also talking about above 236. We want to see 240, 245. 240 has been taken. Look for 245 and then 250. Okay. FSLR, another one called out by JMA as well, breaking that downtrend right on June 23rd. Beautiful day there. Same pattern that we talk about. Downtrend, break of the 50-day, breaking the accumulation. So as long as you held above the 50-day, you should see that move up. We did. 83 was our target. If you can hold above 83, look for around 93. Sorry, 87. I was saying 83, 87. Hold above 87, get to 93. American Eagle, another one called out when it reclaimed the 50 here at 35. We were looking for around 38 to 39, which is the all-time high. Break above that, we could see 41 to 43. Okay, so this is going to be a little long, but I want to go over this in depth. Zim, we called out thanks to our scanners on trade ideas. I didn't really know what Zim was. This is one of my favorite charts, though. Beautiful chart. We did miss this entry. I was looking for a retest the pivot. It came down to retest the pivot, bounced off that pivot beautifully. It's already up like 7% from that pivot. That's not what I want to talk about, though. I did some research on this. This is a shipping company. So then I went down into a shipping rabbit hole. I found a bunch of articles that are talking about what's going on in China right now. And basically, no one's talking about this, but there's a backlog of ships that are waiting to unload their cargo and load new cargo. It's a bigger backlog than the Suez Canal backlog that we saw, a few months ago. So there is a bunch of ports in China that had to get shut down because there was a COVID outbreak, and that caused a massive havoc with all these ships that are waiting in line. So the shipping companies, throughout all this madness that's been going on in COVID, they have been skyrocketing, okay? Look at ZIM. Look at DAC, another one that I like a lot. NMM. This thing is skyrocketing as well. This is one of my favorites because we don't have a massive move up just yet. So we could get in when this reclaims the 50 and VWAP. So keep an eye on this. I need to leave alerts so I don't forget about these. Moving on, though, MATX, another one. Look at these stocks. Another one here pulling back. The weekly is fantastic on this. Weekly engulfing above the 50-day. So if this thing can close like this, we're looking for a hold above 66, and this could start rocketing back to the 80s. Last but not least, GSL, another one. Look at this thing, just skyrocketing during the 2020-2021 move thanks to COVID. And these are really, I think they're just getting started, to be honest, guys. So look at BDI. This is the Baltic Dry Index. If we look at this on the weekly, let's even go to the monthly. There have only been a couple times throughout the history of this index that it has held above the current level. So a lot of people are probably betting on a massive correction here. But what they're not taking into account is this massive backlog that's going on in China, which is like the #1 area in the world for shipping containers and shipping, period, right? Their biggest ports were shut down recently due to a COVID outbreak, and we're seeing skyrocketing shipping cost for everything related to shipping, but mainly shipping containers. Okay, so if this breaks this level, I'd say anywhere above like 3,500, we could be seeing a massive impulse to like 5,000 to 7,000, which we have never seen before except for in the global financial crisis of '06 to '09. Okay, so there's a lot of money to be made here betting against what everyone expects. I think a lot of people are expecting a correction anywhere from where we are now to around 4,000. But if this Baltic Dry Index starts to rip, these shipping companies, the ones that I mentioned, ZIM for starters, this is going to rip. DAC, you guys know, all the ones that I went over. Keep an eye on all of those. I think I'm going to build a portfolio in my long-term portfolio. I'm going to start dollar cost averaging shares in every single company that I mentioned. ZIM, DAC, NMM, MATX, and GSL. I'm going to start accumulating these for the next at least a year. I'm going to hold on to these for a year. One thing I didn't mention, we're coming into peak season for when these cargo ships are unloading and offloading, and onloading, excuse me, winter goods. So like the Christmas shopping stuff, right? The Christmas shipping, all the stuff that goes on in the last quarter of the year. This is when all that stuff is happening in those ports. So there's a massive spike in how many ships have to be docking and loading and unloading goods, and these ports cannot handle it. Do the research, go into Discord, look at all those articles I post. If you guys are not in Discord, just do some research on your own. I think this is a very good investment, so I'm going to look into it for sure. All right, moving on. Not financial advice, by the way, guys. GTBIF, another one that came up on the scanners. I like this one a lot. If it can hold above the pivot around 31, I think this gets a move back to the highs, like a cupping pattern here around 36 to 38. Be on the lookout for that. Another one that I really like, same pattern we've been talking about, downtrend into accumulation, break above the 50-day. If this can hold above like 1050, I think you very likely could get 1280, and then we're looking for around 14, then we're looking for around 17, okay? Another one that I really like, because all the EV companies have been doing so well, is the Global Autonomous ETF, DRIVE, D-R-I-V. What I don't like is it closed just below the weekly pivot, but if we can see a weekly breakout above these levels, these all-time high levels, this could start to rip towards the 32 to 34 area, okay? So be on the lookout for that. Another one of my favorite charts is BABA. BABA had a weekly breakout here, so we see this weekly downtrend. It's also putting in a weekly bull div, which is causing the breakout here. So we have that weekly bull div. We have the Momo bottom, which confirmed right around these candles here. So there's a lot of stuff lining up to make BABA want to go higher. You're testing the 21 on the weekly. If you can hold above that, a little bit of VWAP resistance around 230 to 240, get above that, you should get sucked into that 250 50-week moving average, okay? And then long-term, obviously, get above that. We're looking for 275. There was also call flow on BABA, so that lines up with this weekly breakout as well. All right? All right, let's move on to big tech, and we're going to call it a video. Sorry for the long-winded video, guys, but the scanners were going absolutely ballistic last week, so there's a lot of new names that I have to cover for this watch list. Last but not least, let's talk about tech. Microsoft. Beautiful breakout of the 263 previous high. You had that 265 Fibonacci level get triggered, and now we're pulling back to retest support. This pullback here is bullish because it did trigger the breakout Fibonacci. As long as you trigger that breakout before pulling back, the pullback is bullish. Okay, so if it pulls back here anything above 260, I think, should get bought up into that 271 to 275. So be on the lookout for that. Moving on to Apple. We broke out of our 132 target. The next target is 136. It has to hold above this 134.50 high to even get to that level, though. If it does break that level, you could look for some 136 lottos, but obviously high risk. All right, Facebook. You had a big breakout here of that 333 Fibonacci level. Then our targets were 345 to 348. 345 target was hit. You missed it by 10 cents, but I'm going to consider that hit. You could have taken profit up there. If it does break that level, 349 to, what is the next breakout level here? 360 would be the next level. So 349, 360. Once again, you did break the trigger, so any pullback will be bullish above 330. Moving on, Netflix, you're finally going for that gap fill. So we have a massive gap here that is being filled. Problem is, we had a gap here that we gapped below. So this was actually in need of a fill as well. So we are currently filling that gap. The levels are going to get a little sloppy here, but you can see here. Actually, let's do it this way so it doesn't get too ugly. So that was the original gap. You can see we filled most of it, a little bit to the downside. And now we have another gap below us right around here. So we still have this portion of the gap to fill here. I know these are very ugly, but these levels are very important on Netflix because it fills every single gap. Okay, so this little portion here, let's go from here to here. That is unfilled. And then this one here, you can't take these wicks because it does gap on the lower time frames. That is unfilled, and then this is unfilled here. So above 533, look for 547. That would be the upper portion of that gap. Below, I'd say 520, look for around 512. Moving on to Amazon, you did hit our 3466 target. Next target is 3554. Above that, you have to break 3500 to get to that target. Next support is 3371. We're almost there, okay? So if it bounces off that, look for 3466, break 35, look for 3554. If we get below like 3350, look for around 3280. All right. Last but not least, Tesla. Tesla had a beautiful breakout. If we take a trend line from these levels here, we had a beautiful breakout of this downtrend. Now look what we're doing. We're pulling back to retest that downtrend. Okay, we do have a gap below us, but Tesla is not like Netflix. It doesn't fill every single gap. There's a lot of unfilled gaps on Tesla, so don't let that scare you too much. As long as we stay above 666, I think this pushes back to around 700 to 711. Okay, break 666, then we're going to go for the gap fill at around 656. Then we're going to go for the support around 636. And that would be very ugly because that would mean that this breakout was a fake out. Okay? But all right, guys, that is it for the summary of markets. That is it for the weekly watch list. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe if you guys did. And I will be streaming tomorrow. We're going to have the scanner stream going on from 9:30 in the morning to around 2:55 p.m. And then we're going to start the analysis stream at 3 p.m. Eastern. All right, guys. Make sure to like the video if you guys like the video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you guys are new here. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, guys.